So, what's going on guys, Kade is here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today, we are taking a closer look at the top 4 best rat/fame farming builds in corrupted dungeons. So in this video, for each and every single build, I will give you 2 versions. The first one will be using the build while fame farming, and then the second version of what abilities you want to change when getting invaded by another player. And all of these builds are the best all-around things to use for the best fame per hour and survivability. So, if you choose to use any of these 4 different builds, each one will give you enough mobility to run away from any type of player, and give you enough speed to clear dungeons very quickly. And of course, all of them will work even if you use only flat 4 gear. So with all this said, let's get right into it. So then, taking a closer look at the first fame farming weapon for corrupted dungeons, which is the one and only beer paws build. So the weapon of choice are the beer paws, and for the abilities you want to go with the second Q, 5th W and first passive. Then moving over to your helmet, which you want to go with the scholar's cowl, and pick the third ability and first passive. Then for your chest armor, go with the stalker's jacket, and pick the third ability and first passive. And lastly for shoes, get the soldier boots and choose the second ability and second passive. Then for my choice of capes, I picked the Tetford cape, and for consumables, I went with the stew, poison potions equipped, and 2 healing potions in my inventory. Okay, so first of all, I will explain the fame farming playstyle, and then we will go over what you have to do and what happens when you are getting attacked. So in my opinion, the main important part of fame farming is to know what your abilities do and how to use them. So your Q spell basically makes like a small spin effect in which you damage players. Then your W releases spinning blades, which damages the enemies as well in 2.5 meter radius. And lastly, the E ability makes your character jump in air, and when he lands, it will deal damage to all enemies all around you. Then for your gear abilities, your R ability releases electric shield, which will damage the enemies. Then your D ability is an energy shield, which will activate every hit the enemy do to you. You will get back energy and get armor magic resistance. So, the way you want to farm mobs is always fight 2 to 3 mob groups, in no specific order. Use your Q, W and E and R spell whenever they get off cooldown. Then when you need to close a small distance to your next target, activate the F ability, and lastly when you are fighting the mobs and start getting low energy, use the D ability. Okay, so far so good, and now we go into hard part. So as soon as your dungeon becomes red and you get invaded, you have about few seconds time till the enemies teleport in your dungeon. So if it happens that you are on mobs at that time, that's why we have the F ability, so just use it and reset mobs. Then the next thing you want to do is change your weapon's W ability to the second option, then change your stalker's jacket to the second ability, then go to your soldier boots and change the ability to the third spell. And lastly, change your potions from the poison potions to healing potions. And as to not repeat the same things for each and every single build, I will explain the best strategy to destroy crystals at the end of the video, because the same things applies for all builds. So all that you need right now is to know what your escaping spells do. So your W gives you extra speed. Then your E of course will be the same thing, big jump so you gain speed again. Then your R and D ability now will give you 2 shields to protect yourself. And lastly, we have the best mobility boots in the game, aka the F ability. One thing to note is that use boots ability 3 to 4 seconds earlier, even before you want to use it, because it will take time to give you max speed, but when it does you will be untouchable. So in conclusion, this is an amazing build which has high AoE damage to fame farm, and at the same time with quick tweaks on few abilities will give you the best chances of survival against the invader. Then moving over to the second weapon, which is the bloodletter build. So our weapon of choice is the bloodletter, and for the abilities you go with the second Q, 5th W and first passive. And for the offhand you pick the Mistcaller. Then for your helmet you go with the scholar's cowl and pick the third ability and first passive. Then for the chest armor there are 2 options, as I don't want to make this video boring and showing the same build just with different weapons. So if you want a higher chance of survivability and in return sacrifice few seconds of your fame farming, then go with the assassin's jacket and pick the second ability and first passive. But if you really don't care that much about 100% survivability and want faster time killing mobs, then use the same stalker's jacket setup like in the previous build. And lastly for your shoes, you want to go with the royal boots and pick the third ability and second passive. Then for my choice of capes, I picked the Tetford cape, and for consumables I went with the cabbage soup, poison potions equipped and 2 healing potions in my inventory. And then as far as your fame farming abilities go, your Q is a small dash that will deal damage in 3-meter radius. Then your W is called the chain slash, which you can use to dash once per enemy. So if you see 3 mobs, you can use 3 times the W, which again will dash you and deal damage to the enemy. And lastly for the E, when a target is below 40% health, it will deal massive amounts of damage and basically one-shot the enemy. And if you properly target the enemies in a straight line, the spell can touch multiple enemies. So if you use my fame farming strategy, you'll be able to one-shot all the close standing mobs in that group. Then for your defensives, you have the R ability, which will give you damage resistance, but if you keep on running out of the energy, then change it to mend wounds. And when you're out of combat, you will get restored energy. Then like in the previous build, we have the D ability, which will give you shield, and enemies attacking you will give you energy. And then the F ability, aka the boots, will give you extra speed. But I recommend to only use it if the next enemy group is far away, or save it to reset mobs when the enemy is attacking. So then as far as your fame farming strategy, you want to do the same thing and attack groups of 2 to 3 mobs, and use your Q and W whenever you have them off cooldown. But instead of focusing on one mob, split the damage, so your objective is to get all mobs in that one group, to get below 40% health, and then use your E ability and one-shot them. Then of course, like I said, to protect yourself and give energy, use the R or D ability. And last but not least, to close distance between groups of mobs, use the F ability. And this should be self-explanatory, but of course use the poison potions on solo bosses or the big boss. And now let's move over to the part where the enemy invades your dungeon. So what you want to do is activate your F ability and run away from mobs, aka reset them. Then go to your weapon and change the W ability to the second option. Then go to your assassin's jacket and change to the third ability. And lastly, change your poison potions for healing potions. So then in a quick summary, your Q, W and E, all of them are dashes, so use it for more mobility. Then your R spell is invisibility, and most of the time I would suggest to use it when you are on mobs, to reset them or if the enemy player is right on you. And by unleashing the mobs, you will put them on the enemy that is chasing you. Then your D ability stays the same, which in this case just gives you another defensive. And then we have the F ability, which after using will take 2-3 seconds, but then you will get a super fast speed. I would recommend to use the boots as soon as you see the enemy, or if you have to run past huge groups of mobs. And then like I said previously, at the end of the video, I will explain the strategy on what is the best way to run and how to destroy the crystals. So in conclusion, this is the best build ever you will get for mobility and survivability. While you won't be clearing super fast mobs like the previous build, but you will still get good damage and best of the best chance of survival. Then for my third Corrupted Dungeons fame farming weapon, we have the Axe build. So the weapon of choice, we go with the Hand of Core and pick the second Q, 5th W and 1st passive. Then for my helmet, we go with the Scholar's Cowl and pick the 3rd ability and 1st passive. Then for the chest armor, we go with the Stalker's Jacket and go with the 3rd ability and 1st passive. Lastly for shoes, we pick the Soldier Boots and go with the 2nd ability and 2nd passive. Then for my choice of capes, I picked the Tetford cape, and for consumables, I went with the stew, poison potions equipped and 2 healing potions in my inventory. And then as far as your fame farming abilities go, your Q is a spin ability, which will deal AoE damage, then the W is another AoE spell, which will apply spinning blades to your character, and anyone close to you will get damaged. And lastly we have the E ability, which by using you will get movement speed and your character will physically spin, dealing damage. Then for your gear piece abilities, you should be familiar already. So, the R ability applies electric field to you, damaging all enemies close by. Then the D ability gives you shield, increasing your armor, and each hit the enemy does to you, it will replenish your energy. So then as for your fame farming strategy, the way you want to fame farm mobs is always fight 2 to 3 mob groups, and in no specific order. So just use your Q, W, E and R spell whenever they get off cooldown. Then when you need to close a small distance to your next target, activate the F sprint ability. And lastly, when you are fighting the mobs and start getting low energy, use the D ability. And now again, let's go into the hard part. So as soon as your dungeon becomes red and you get invaded, you have about few seconds time till the enemy teleports in your dungeon. So if you so happen to be on mobs, then that's why we have the F ability. So just use it and reset mobs. Then the next thing you want to do is change your weapon's W ability to the second W option. Then change your Stalker's Jacket to the second ability. Then go to your Soldier Boots and change the ability to the third spell. And lastly, change your potions from poison potions to healing potions. All that you need to know for this specific build is that your W gives you extra speed. Then your E will spin, which will increase your movement speed. Then your R and D ability now will give you 2 shields to protect yourself. And lastly, we have the best mobility boots in the game, aka the F ability. One thing to note is that use boots ability 3 to 4 seconds earlier, even before you want to use it, because it will take time to give you max speed, but when it does, you'll be able to move super quickly. So in conclusion, this is an amazing build which has high AoE damage to fame farm, and it is very familiar with the first build. So decide which weapon you like better and have fun fame farming. And with all of this said, for my last and final weapon, we have the one-hand spear build. So the weapon of choice, we go with the spear and pick the first Q, first W and second passive. And for the offhand, we go with the Miscaller. Then for my helmet, we go with the same Scholar's Cal, because it is right now the best thing to use. And for the spells, we pick the third ability and first passive. Then for the chest armor, you go with the Stalker's Jacket and pick the third ability and first passive. And lastly for shoes, we go with the Royal Boots and pick the third ability and second passive. Then for my choice of capes, I pick the Tetford cape, and for consumables, I went with the cabbage soup, poison potions equipped and 2 healing potions in my inventory. And then as far as your fame farming abilities go, your Q ability is a stab, which is not a AoE spell, but if you hit mobs the right way it will stab multiple enemies. Then the W spell is the Forest of Spears, which while using your character in a cone will be stabbing all enemies. And lastly we have the E ability, which is basically like a dash, and if you use it on enemies with 3 stacks, then it will deal a bunch of damage in AoE, the same way the stabbing ability works. So the way you want to fame farm is like per other builds, fight groups of 2 to 3 mobs, and use the Q ability 3 times and then use your E ability. Like I said at the start, you should not just stab a mob normally, but make sure that the point of the end of the stab will hit other mobs next to him. And then for your W, it's self-explanatory, and then of course use the R ability for more AoE damage. Then use your D ability whenever you start getting low energy, and last but not the least, use your F ability to reset mobs or close distance between different mob groups. And then last time going over for abilities you want to change when the enemy player attacks your dungeon. So as soon as that happens you want to change your W ability to the 4th option. Then for your Stalker's Jacket change to the 2nd ability, and of course change from poison potions to healing potions. So what you have is the W ability. If by a chance a player gets close to you and starts attacking you, then you use it and it will reflect the incoming damage. Then for mobility you have the E dashing spell and the boots F ability. And then like in any other builds, you still have 2 defensive shield abilities. Both of them will give you extra resistance to incoming damage. So in conclusion, the spear build is good and rewarding, especially for older players who know how to use it. For any beginners, I would recommend to use the 3 previous builds, but if you really enjoy spears and you want to give it a shot, then try it out and have fun. And with all of this said, we just took an in-depth look into top 4 best rat/fame farming builds. But of course you can't succeed if you don't know what to do. So right now in a quick overview I will try to explain my strategy and thought process of what goes through my mind when getting invaded, and where or how to kill the crystals. So first of all, even before invading, as soon as you get into the dungeon, you want to open your minimap and look at the dungeon's layout. As to not overcomplicate things, I will show you my clearing path in these 3 examples. So here in the first map, first things first, I took a mental note in my head that these are most likely spots where crystals will spawn. So my clearing route first of all is clear the middle section and then clear the path to each and every single crystal location. The idea behind this is that when an enemy attacks you, you will be able to destroy the first crystal right off from the start, and then you have already cleared a path to mobs to the next ones. Then here in the second example, again here are the crystal locations which are most likely to spawn. So I again cleared the path to the middle, so I would have main 4 path directions and then start clearing path from one crystal to another. And lastly, in the third example, so you would have some different map layouts and examples, here are the crystal spots I think that will spawn. So I cleared the path to the middle and then start clearing one by one. My last final remarks are that sure, a lot of times you won't be able to clear all the path, or 100% tell where all the crystals will spawn. So that's why these builds are super mobile, and you want to go from one crystal to another, and only when you see an enemy use the run abilities and everything else. Sometimes I will go through mobs instead of what is cleared because most likely there is a player waiting for me. So in conclusion, as long as you have a good build, then as well you have a clear path to the middle, which means that you have 4 directions to go, then you should have 90% chance of survival. And that's about it. So, I really do appreciate everyone for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback, or different Corrupted Dungeons builds that you would recommend to other players, then feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe, and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and you wouldn't miss any more amazing content from me. With all this said, you have an amazing day and I will catch you in my next video. So take it easy, peace.
Yo, I ain't here for the money.